Hey all you creative violin, viola, and cello players, what is up? Jacob back here with you for another special report from the pickuptest.com, an electric string player. And today we're going to be talking about 3 tips for using IRs with bowed strings. Now at this point, I've probably spent more time than any human being on the planet using the new VSound 2 and the tone Dexter, trying it with every possible combination of pickups and electric instruments. And after doing a lot of listening and getting a lot of feedback from you guys, the more it becomes clear to me that these devices really are completely new types of technology that work on a completely different premise. So I wanted to make this video to give you guys some insights into what to do and possibly what not to do and how to get the most out of these types of devices. You know, whether it's the tone Dexter or the VSound 2, the common trait that they both share is that they tend to be able to eliminate the harsh piezo quackiness and high-end hiss that you get from every piezo or contact pickup on the market. And they do it in a magical way that analog preamplifiers and EQs really just can't replicate. But that also can lead to some unintended consequences when working with different types of pickups. You see, most of us tend to favor dull sounding pickups that don't have a lot of high end because we're trying to avoid that quack. Take the realist, for instance. Those of us cellists that use the realist, and I know a lot of you guys out there use that pickup, it works especially well for bowing because there's really virtually no high end in the pickup. If you look at it on a graphic equalizer or an analyzer, if you've ever run it through any recording software, you would see that the waveform completely drops off to 0 after the mid-range. Now, this dull sound does help to eliminate a lot of that high end that we don't think we want. But the problem is when you combine that with a system like the tone Dexter or the VSound, which is already kind of dulling out the sound as well, you get dull on dull, right? And that combination does not make for a more usable sound. In fact, with the tone Dexter, my experience is a lot of us tend to dial in the most pleasing possible sound in our bedrooms or in our practice areas, getting ready for a show. And then on stage, a lot of the time, I've had really tricky results with it because the wave maps that I created were just too dull sounding and didn't cut at all, particularly with the pickup I was using. Think of this like our teachers urging us to play closer to the bridge, right? Especially if we're soloing with an orchestra or we need to cut through in a certain solo in a string quartet we're playing, for example. That sound can be really harsh and hissy under our ear, but a lot of that information needs to be present in our tone to be able to cut through the ensemble or cut through the mix. And so a lot of the time, the bottom line is that these units, I think, work better with more full range pickups, pickups that really give you more of the full range of the sound, which means a lot of the time these pickups are or a lot of the time the tone Dexter and the VSound, to me, after a lot of experimentation, sound better with brighter pickups that actually might not sound as good to our ear, more nasally sounding pickups, which often don't have the most realistic sound to our ear. A lot of this comes down to the difference between a realistic and a usable sound, and I talked about that quite a bit in the VSound shootout, and I'm going to link that video below. In fact, a lot of my colleagues got sketchy results using a tone Dexter and a realist because the tone Dexter was trying to compensate so much for all of the missing high end that the realist just wasn't giving it, that it would actually spike that frequency and you would sometimes hear some hiss. Now, I haven't had this problem using my tone Dexter with a realist, but it has been a pretty common report that I've gotten. So be on the lookout for that and just be aware that a more full range pickup, a brighter sounding, maybe even a little bit more nasally sounding pickup, will generally give you better results with both of these boxes in my experience. Tip number 2, the blend is your friend. You can almost think of IRs as a substitute for a miniature microphone close micing your instrument. Of course, it gives you all of the advantages and isolation of a piezo pickup so that you can work with effects and crazy ambient stuff and not worry about feedback and bleed. It also eliminates a lot of the issues that traditional players would have using blending, which has been a typical solution for maintaining the punch and cut of a pickup with the realism and air of a microphone. We did an entire video about blending in our e-bootcamp on the pickup test, but one of the major drawbacks with blending is how not only does this add to the cost, size, and sophistication of your rig, but you have to deal with issues like phasing, and of course all of the same weaknesses that mic and pickup already have. Now, IRs can allow you to get the air of the mic sound, but just like using mics, or as we talked about a minute ago with more dull sounding pickups, we tend to dial in a sound that's great for our ears, but doesn't really have the performance situation in mind. In other words, in live performances, as we were just talking about, you generally need more high-end, more bzz, more cut, just to be able to get through the band and be heard. For those of you that play in more acoustic situations, this may not be as big of an issue for you. But for most of us, as a general rule, we dial in our sound way too on the dull side when we're just listening to ourselves in headphones at home, right? And just like the microphone pickup solution I described before, we can also use blending with the IR itself, using a little bit of IR to get a little bit more of the air and natural sound, but maintaining a certain percentage of that nasally harsh pickup sound just to cut through. The Tone Dexter allows you to do this right on the box, and it's an incredibly helpful feature when playing live. Whereas with the VSound, unfortunately, you have to do this in software, so plugging in your laptop and trying to dial that in. So if it's possible, you might want to take your laptop to the gig if you're going to be using this in unpredictable live situations where you're in a different room or playing with a different band at a different volume level every night. This can also be done with effects loops on your amplifier, and in some cases your multi-effects pedals as well. My HX Stomp has two loops that I can control the amount of blend I'm getting with an expression pedal or as a preset. So for example, I can have a plucking sound that has a lot more of that punchy pickup tone in it, and then with the flip of a switch, I can have a completely different sound that has a lot more of the IR dialed in for my bowing. I can also, of course, change reverb and compression settings as well and have them ready to go with the push of a button in a preset. This is invaluable for us cello players and for violinists and violists as well. And that takes us to our third and final tip, which is that IRs are not a panacea. They may not be for you. There really is a continuum with realistic sound on one side and useful sound on the other. And we all have to find where we want to be based mostly off of our tastes, but also on the type of playing we do. And in general, the louder the situation, the more you need a sound that is useful, that is just going to cut through, because there's so much other stuff going on if you play with keyboards and electric bass players and drummers, that only a tiny part of the frequency of your sound is really going to be able to cut through in any case, right? So even if you were sending a full spectrum realistic tone through your amplifier with a band playing like that, people would only hear a very, very narrow part of that spectrum. So for example, if you're playing electric violin in a death metal band, 99% of what you need from your sound is just to cut through at all costs. And I really don't think IRs make any sense for you at all. Neither of these two devices would really be a good investment. And then of course, the quieter the performing situation, the more details the audiences can hear and the more details you have the possibility of conveying in your tone. At the far end of that spectrum would be all acoustic situations, maybe a gypsy jazz group or an acoustic trio, maybe a classical duo of two string players. And in those cases, I'm not sure IRs make sense for you either. You'd probably be much better off using a microphone. And of course, most types of mics will be totally useful and usable in those types of situations. So this technology is going to be most useful for those of us that are in the middle, where we play gigs that are reasonably loud, where there's, some level of amplification involved, but where we're trying to convey a sound to the audience that's somewhat realistic, but where, because we're using effects or because there's a decent amount of volume to compete with, we need to have the isolation of a pickup. That's really the sweet spot where I think this type of technology and understanding how to use it can really transform and revolutionize your playing. And I think that applies to a lot of us. For more information about either of these two units, you can watch the demo videos on this channel, or to listen to sound libraries where we test these units out with most of the major electric cellos and violins, and also a lot of the standard pickups on the market. You can check out the sound library at www.thepickuptest.com. And by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube and you've gotten this far into the video, you know how valuable and unique this content is, and probably have an idea of how much time and effort it took to create this. So please don't be a jackass. Leave a comment below, like and subscribe, and most importantly, spread the word. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.